Hey, it's Mike Brennan. We're doing our Cinco de Mayo show. All of our Latin friends out there, and those who aren't, probably celebrating Cinco de Mayo, friends. Uh, anyway, so we have Paul Eisenstein on the show. Paul and I have known each other, I don't know, 30 years, I think. And
Easily.
one of the real auto experts in the Detroit area. And so I asked him to come on periodically to talk about all the stuff going on in the auto space. Right
Mm.
now, it's tariffs on just about everything you could think of from good old Donnie. And the latest one over the weekend that came was auto parts. Let's talk about that first.
Yeah. Well, first of all, people should know that the official start date for automotive tariffs was May 3rd. So we are now officially in the tariff zone. And I think people have yet to fully understand just how broad an impact that will have. First of all, it is going to impact very specifically imported automobiles. Um, you get that Mercedes S class or the C class or whatever. You get any number of vehicles from Japan or Korea. They're going to go up. The tariff is 25%. That is, however, pretty much on the wholesale price. So let's say you're talking about a $50,000 car. 25% of roughly $40,000 means that you could be seeing a $10,000 increase on that imported vehicle if the manufacturer, and this is a key, if the manufacturer decides to pass on the tariff costs to consumers. We don't know that yet. Some automakers are temporarily not passing them on, but I think in the months to come, we're going to see more and more will pass more and more of the tariff on. Okay,
I
that's
read
that's
something over
part
the
one,
weekend that
Mike.
Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, was saying they weren't going to do it right away. Uh,
Right away. Let's see, Ford and a couple other makers have said they'll at least go to July. Now, here's the thing. Remember that those tariffs aren't on vehicles that were already in the country ahead of May 3rd. So, in fact, we saw a lot of manufacturers race as many vehicles as they could to the. So, you may still find vehicles that aren't going to qualify for the tariffs. You also need to be very careful because, frankly, some dealers are going ahead and are going to start putting tariff prices on as surcharges. So you need to be very careful when you're buying a vehicle in the coming weeks and months to make sure you're not being flim-flammed. Okay, so we talked about imported vehicles. Let's go to stage two. Vehicles. Remember, the tariffs cover not just imported autos, but auto parts. And a significant percentage of the parts that go into almost all vehicles come from abroad. And this can be anything from wiring harnesses to windshield wipers, anti-lock brakes to suspension components, powertrains, individual components like transmissions. The amount of parts we on American assembly lines that come from abroad are substantial. And so that's going to impact even so called US made vehicles. The Anderson Economic Group, Mike, they're out of Western Michigan. They were saying $2,000 to $3,000 on the typical American made vehicle. And by the way, that's just part two. There's part three and part four to this story if you'd like me to continue.
yeah, go ahead.
All right, let's go to part three. Uh, you're not going to buy a new vehicle. Maybe you're priced out of the market. Maybe you don't want to buy a new vehicle right now simply for political reasons. Well, that used vehicle, that's going to go up in price because there's going to be more of you folks moving from new to used vehicles. And the estimate is we could see used vehicles go up, according to Cox Automotive, by as much as $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, remember during COVID when there was a shortage of new vehicles, we saw record prices for used cars and trucks and crossovers. Well, look for the same thing to happen now. Here's where it gets worse. It also means that part four of my rant, part four is parts. You have a repair you need to make on that used vehicle or the vehicle you're just having sit in your driveway. Maybe you need an air filter. Maybe you need, well, it doesn't matter what. Repair parts like sheet metal, in many cases, those things come from abroad as well. So you could be looking at substantial increases in parts. And finally, let's talk about the thing that often gets missed in this equation. That's insurance. Well, the reality is insurance is typically based not just on replacement, but on repairs. And what happens when you need a repair? Well, number one, you're probably going to pay more for some of those parts because they're imported. Number two, we're seeing some countries, China in particular, slow down delivery of parts and goods. And so it may take longer to get repairs made. And when you do, your insurance could go up. In fact, even if you don't need repairs, your insurance is almost certainly going to go up as a result of the tariffs.
Boy, all sorts of good stuff there in the automotive space, huh? Boy, yeah.
This is a bad situation. Cox Automotive, which is on the somewhat conservative side, estimates that we're going to see new vehicle sales drop from, well, it was about 16 million last year. The estimates were 16.1 to 16.5 this year. Cox is now saying it'll be at most 15 and a half for all of this year and could drop down to as low as 15. And there's an asterisk to that. If the Trump tariffs and other moves wind up resulting in us going into recession, we could see the new car market drop to 14 million. And
Yeah.
that's a huge drop. We're starting to get back into recession levels, even without a recession. Remember, new vehicle sales were running substantially ahead of last year. So if you factor it in, that means the remaining months of the year, we could see recession level car sales, even if the overall economy doesn't go into recession.
And as such, we could see factories taking shutdowns for a while because there's this, obviously you can't, why build a vehicle if you can't sell it, right? So,
Exactly. And anybody who thinks, well, we'll keep American factories going, we're going to move stuff over here. You don't really understand how it works. The reality is, yes, there may be a few plants that may be able to increase domestic production. We may be able to see a few products shipped back to the US, but even just shipping back from, say, Mexico or Canada is a difficult process. You have to come up with the tooling, you have to move the tools, you have to line up the suppliers, you have to do all these processes to shift production from one location to another. Now, let's say you're talking about wanting to start whole with products that were never built here or where you don't have the capacity to build it in existing plants. If you're lucky, it may take just 2 years to approve the financing for a new plant, find the location, build the plant, and then tool it. It then takes time to get a workforce in and trained, and then to ramp up production. It seldom takes less than 3 to 4 years from the time you even start thinking about a new plant in the US or anywhere else before you can actually have that plant fully up to speed.
yeah, I think the folks in Washington really don't understand the industry. We won't go into politics on that, but yeah, they clearly don't realize. I mean, by the time Trump's second term is up, then maybe the factories would be coming online. But even then, I don't know.
Well, here's something interesting. You may recall it's been about a month now. Some of the folks from Hyundai met with the president in the White House, and they talked about all the plans they have for increasing production. Almost everything that they have in process or even announced was stuff that was already being put in place under Biden. So, for example, the new Hyundai Meta plant, which has a capacity, I believe, of 400,000 vehicles. It's down in Georgia. It focuses primarily on EVs and some plug-in hybrids. Well, that plant was announced under the Biden administration, as were a number of other battery electric vehicle plants. In fact, one of the problems is a lot of the plants that focused on EVs may wind up, because of steps that the president is taking, not being able to produce anywhere near the capacity that they thought they would be building at. So, in fact, some of those plants, most of them being in the South, in red states, may wind up losing jobs. Another thing Hyundai announced was they said that they were going to do a steel plant in the U.S. You may recall they said they want to build a steel mill down in Louisiana. That project was first conceived in 2018. They probably will not be able to have that plant up and running till 2026 or 2027 seems to be the target.
Hmm.
In other words, 8 or 9 years. So a number of facilities, particularly like steel, could, if the manufacturers were even to consider putting up these factories today, they may not be done until after the end of the decade.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. You're probably closer to the industry than I am. I'm more of a generalist than specifically focused. Do you think Trump's going to back off? Is he going to get so much heat from the auto industry that he's going to throttle this back, or what do you think?
Well, let's put it this way. If we all of a sudden in the third and fourth quarter start seeing automotive profits disappear, some of the manufacturers go into the red, or the flip side, they realize that they can't absorb the costs and have to pass it on to consumers. That would be a real problem for him. Even more so would be if car sales plummet. Remember, the auto industry employs about 1 out of every 7 or 8 people in America. We're talking about 30, 40 million people in America who have jobs that are at least tangentially related to the auto industry. That may be groundskeepers and ad people, as well as those who are working the assembly line.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's a major, major force in the economy. And if we see car sales drop 10, 15, even 20%, as some people fear, the number of lost jobs and the impact to the broad economy would be so severe. We've already seen Trump back off on some things like computers and cell phones. He's delayed some of the other international tariffs. He's already indicated that he will probably drop tariffs on China, in his words, substantially. So, will he not have to back off on auto tariffs? I think it's going to be hard to imagine that by the end of this year he won't back off. He'll find something, probably knowing Trump, to be able to declare victory, even if it is a full scale retreat. But I can't imagine that he won't have to change the rules.